Jake Butt, Big Ten Network, and former Michigan tight end, joins us on 365 Sports. And Jake, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. From your perspective as an analyst of college football, but also as a Big Ten player, and we know what kind of a great year they just had, what are your thoughts about the discussion of the next level of the college football playoff and automatic qualifiers, play-in games on championship weekend, et cetera? Is it getting to the point where it's too confusing, or what do you like?
Is it getting to the point where it's too confusing? I don't know. I've just kind of embraced this. It seems like, once we started the first domino with NIL and the transfer portal, seems like every year there's been more headlines of further and further change. So it's something that we're going to be in for a while. We're still in this transition period of college football and college sports as a whole. I lean into it. I'm okay with it. I'm embracing it a little bit. This is kind of to be expected anytime there's change. I think we've seen some positives in some sense. The NIL and the transfer portal has been a positive. It's led to more parity in college football, more upsets, more balance. But obviously it has its downsides. The chaos and it's hurt some of the soul of college football, what we love. So I think we're in the process of rebalancing a little bit. I don't think an expanded college football playoff does much for me as a fan of college football. I really believe there's probably 3 or 4 teams, maybe 5 teams on any given year that can actually compete for a national title. So expanding the playoff, there's not going to be a Cinderella story like in March Madness in basketball. Expanding the playoff, all that does is allow for more bowl games that were deemed meaningless to now have meaning. So as is true with anything, there's some good, there's some bad. I expect this change to continue, going forward for the next probably half a decade.
Jake, how would you feel about the Big Ten and SEC's for automatic qualifiers? It sounds like, since you're not in favor of expansion, that's something that also would be a non-starter for you too, should they expand.
That's far.
So much forgiveness. Wait, did you say forgiveness like far, or forgiveness like forgiveness? Forgiveness. Forgiveness. Forgiveness.
I'm hearing far.
Forgiveness. Like forgiveness. Forgiveness? Forgiveness.
I'm still hearing far, but whatever.
Introducing Stealth 2 with more carbon for more forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Just hit it.
Yeah, I get it though. I put myself in the shoes of the Big Ten and the SEC. They're in the driver's seat here in college football, and the rest of college football needs them more than the Big Ten and the SEC needs the rest. So I completely understand the leverage aspect of both conferences fighting to get as many AQs as possible. That makes complete sense to me. Again, it's not going to add, we're not going to see a 15 seed have a Cinderella run and win a national title. So as long as they're not trying to sell it as that to me, I'm okay with it.
Jake, what's it like to be a Michigan man who sees the Wolverines beat the Buckeyes only to watch them go and win a national championship? Like, you've got the bragging rights, but that just had to be such a weird mix of emotions to have that incredible win and then go watch the run that Ohio State went on.
Yeah, it's listen, I respect the game. It was really puzzling. I think I was as confused as everybody watching that game in late November. No one expected Michigan to pull off that upset, and yet they did, and that's what makes that rivalry so special. But I respect Coach Day. I respect the players. Being a Big Ten analyst, getting to cover Ohio State and get to know the person of Ryan Day and, the coordinators, the players, the man in the arena, that team was challenged, and the run that they went on in the postseason was special. We have to acknowledge that and give respect to them. That's one of the all-time great, in terms of just raw talent, that's one of the all-time great talent compositions in terms of a roster. The fact that they fell short and lost to Michigan and Oregon in the regular season they'll never be included in the all-time great college football team. But that still was a really, really special team, and you saw that come together there in the postseason.
As a Big Ten guy, and even though you cover the entire game, what they've done now with Michigan last year, Ohio State this year, with Oregon being number one most of the year, Penn State looks like they're not just happy to be kind of in the conversation, which at times it's been that way. They're dead set on getting better. Your thoughts about what the conference has done, because it has been more of an SEC landscape for quite some time.
Well, that kind of goes back to the first question, just about the change in college football. There's just an ebb and flow to all things in life. And, back to when I was playing 2013 to 2016, and even before that, the SEC was the dominant player in college football. But some of these changes with the NIL and the transfer portal, there's been a rebalancing of talent across, the nation. And that's led to more opportunities, of which the Big Ten has fully, taken advantage of. I would go to camp in high school, and it felt like all the five-star talent was going down south. They were going to go to Alabama. And there was times when I was playing where Alabama would have a five-star, multiple five-stars, sitting on the bench waiting their turn. Nowadays, you don't have that, right? If you're a five-star, you're going to where you can play right now. So that's kind of one of the big advantages. It's provided the opportunity for the Big Ten to start to solidify themselves next to and maybe ahead of the SEC, and it's taken full advantage of that.
Do you think, though, that we're going to see maybe wild swings in who's good and who's not year to year because of this? Could – look, what we saw with Michigan. I mean, they went from being great to being 7-5, and they fought their way through that because they had a ton of talent. But there, by the grace of God, go many schools that have, especially from this year's playoff, that have been cleaned out. And then there's teams that really haven't been that can take their spot.
I think the major players will remain the major players. There's a brand piece of this, where, kids growing up, even me growing up in Columbus, Ohio, I knew the brand of Michigan, and that's going to be the truth for the major programs like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Notre Dame, Alabama, Georgia, Texas. That is going to remain to be true. But what I do think is going to happen is how we define success is going to change. It's going to be ever more rare as the years go on to see a college football team go undefeated. That's just with the expanded playoff, the change in the postseason, conference realignment. As I mentioned, the talent redisbursement. It's going to be much more challenging to run the table. So you're going to have more 2 and maybe 3 loss national champions. So I think that's going to be the piece that changes more than anything.
I think the one thing that everybody could sort of agree on, Jake, with the playoff was the home games absolutely rocked. And that, if anything, that the downside to getting a bye was not having those. How do you think the Big House would be in a college football playoff home game type setting?
Completely agree. That was the best part, and I hope they can find a way to protect that and, if anything, implement more of that. The Big House would be awesome. I mean, one of my favorite games I've went to all time, I had just retired from the NFL, was Michigan's first victory over Ohio State in the Big House back in 2022. That's Aiden Hutchinson and, Cade McNamara, Hassan Haskins, and the snow was falling. It was a cold, chilly, dreary Midwestern day, but there was something magical about that day. So, I like it. I lean in. I was there for Notre Dame, Indiana, that playoff game. That was also extremely cold, but there's something magical about it. And I think as football fans, we appreciate that. So, especially growing up in the Midwest too, my dad would always say, he's like, why is it that all the northern teams, when it comes to bowl games and postseasons, have to go down south, and it effectively end up being an extra home game for SEC teams? Now you get a little bit of that balance to add into the cold weather and the climate, which just makes for a fun twist to college football.
Hey, Jake, thank you, man. Appreciate your time. Appreciate the knowledge and giving us a perspective from not just being a Michigan man or a Big Ten alum, but what you do with the network and just loving college football. We appreciate your time.
Always.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Jake Butt with us, Big Ten Network, on many things college football. That's another perspective from a different part of the country, another different conference.